When I heard my boss Victoria Hayes laugh through her office door, I thought she was celebrating our team's latest campaign success. I was wrong. Dead wrong. What I actually heard was her taking credit for 3 months of my sleepless nights. My breakthrough strategy that could revolutionize how tech companies approach social media marketing, and my future promotion. But here's the thing about eavesdropping on your own career being stolen. It changes you in ways you never expected. And sometimes, just sometimes, it leads you to take back more than what was originally yours. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Austin morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Pinnacle Marketing Solutions as I balanced my coffee and laptop bag, rushing toward the elevator. I was actually excited that Thursday morning, which, looking back now, seems almost laughable. I had spent the previous night putting the finishing touches on what I knew was going to be my breakthrough moment. The comprehensive social media strategy I developed for TechFlow Industries wasn't just another campaign proposal. It was a complete reimagining of how B2B tech companies could humanize their brand presence while driving actual conversion metrics. 3 months earlier, when Victoria first assigned me the TechFlow account, she'd made it clear this was my chance to prove myself worthy of the senior strategist position that had been dangling in front of me like a carrot for the past year. TechFlow was our biggest potential client, a rapidly growing software company that specialized in workflow automation for small businesses. Their current marketing was stale, corporate, and completely missing their target demographic of overwhelmed entrepreneurs who needed to feel understood, not lectured to. I had poured everything into this project. While my colleagues went home at 5:30, I stayed until 9, researching competitor strategies, analyzing demographic data, and crafting what I knew was revolutionary. The strategy centered around authentic storytelling through micro-influencer partnerships, specifically targeting small business owners who shared similar struggles to TechFlow's ideal customers. Instead of talking about features and benefits, we would show real people solving real problems. The campaign included a 12-month content calendar, detailed budget breakdowns, projected ROI calculations, and even mock-ups of how the content would look across different platforms. The brilliance wasn't just in the concept, it was in the execution details. I had identified 17 specific micro-influencers, whose audiences perfectly matched TechFlow's customer base, negotiated preliminary rates, and created a tiered approach that would scale with the client's growth. The numbers were solid. Projected 37% increase in qualified leads within 6 months, 45% improvement in brand sentiment, and an estimated return of $4.2 for every marketing dollar spent. But what made me most proud was the human element. I had conducted informal interviews with 12 small business owners, understanding their pain points, their daily struggles, and the language they actually used when talking about productivity challenges. This wasn't marketing speak. This was real connection. The campaign would feature genuine stories of entrepreneurs who had transformed their operations, with TechFlow's software shown as part of their journey rather than the centerpiece. Victoria had seemed genuinely impressed during our preliminary discussions. She'd asked thoughtful questions, requested additional research, and even complimented my thoroughness. When I suggested we present the full strategy to TechFlow's leadership team next week, she agreed enthusiastically, telling me to prepare a comprehensive presentation that would showcase not just the strategy but my growth as a strategic thinker. That morning, walking toward the elevator, I felt the kind of professional confidence I hadn't experienced since college. This was my moment. The promotion to senior strategist came with a $20,000 salary increase, equity options, and most importantly, the respect I'd been working towards since joining Pinnacle 3 years ago. I'd proven myself on smaller accounts, consistently delivered results above projections, and earned positive feedback from every client I'd managed. This TechFlow strategy was going to be my professional breakthrough. The elevator doors opened on the 15th floor, and I stepped into the familiar buzz of our open concept office. The Austin marketing scene was competitive and fast-paced, but Pinnacle had carved out a reputation for innovative strategies that actually worked. We specialized in tech startups and lifestyle brands, which meant our client roster included everyone from bootstrapped app developers to venture-backed companies preparing for IPO. I loved the energy of our office. The exposed brick walls were covered with campaign awards and client success stories. The kitchen area always smelled like locally roasted coffee, and the conference rooms had names like Brainstorm and Game Changer etched in frosted glass. It felt like the kind of place where big ideas happened, where careers were built, where someone like me could really make a mark. My desk was in the northwest corner, close enough to Victoria's office that I could see when she was available but far enough away that I wasn't constantly aware of her presence. I'd arranged my workspace meticulously, dual monitors for efficiency, a small succulent plant Sophia had given me for good luck, and a framed photo from my graduation day at UT, where I'd finished my marketing degree summa cum laude. As I settled into my chair and opened my laptop, I noticed Victoria's door was closed, which was unusual for 9:15 in the morning. She typically kept an open-door policy until 10, encouraging team members to drop by with questions or updates. Through the frosted glass, I could see she was on a call, gesturing animatedly as she spoke. Probably discussing weekend plans with Derek, I thought. They'd been married for 5 years, and from what I could observe, they seemed like the perfect Austin power couple. She with her marketing expertise, he with his sustainable architecture firm that had been featured in Architectural Digest twice. I pulled up my presentation file, planning to do one final review before our afternoon meeting with TechFlow. Every slide was perfect. The opening grabbed attention with startling statistics about B2B marketing failure rates. The strategy section laid out our approach with clear, compelling visuals. The implementation timeline showed realistic milestones with measurable outcomes. The budget breakdown demonstrated value while staying within TechFlow's stated parameters. And the projected results were conservative enough to be believable while impressive enough to justify the investment. Around 10:30, I noticed Victoria's call was still ongoing. Her door remained closed, and through the glass, I could see her pacing, something she only did during high-stakes conversations. Curious about whether this might affect our TechFlow meeting, I walked toward the kitchen area to refill my coffee, which happened to take me past her office. That's when I heard her voice clearly through the door that wasn't quite as soundproof as it appeared. "The influencer approach is brilliant, absolutely brilliant," Victoria was saying, her tone animated with the kind of excitement I recognized from her most successful client presentations. "We're talking about authentic storytelling that actually converts. The research behind the demographic targeting is incredibly thorough. Someone really did their homework on this one." I paused, confused. Victoria was describing my strategy, using my exact language, my specific terminology. But who was she talking to? Our TechFlow presentation wasn't scheduled until this afternoon, and as far as I knew, she hadn't discussed my strategy with anyone else. "The ROI projections are conservative but compelling," she continued. $4.2 return for every dollar invested, with a 37% increase in qualified leads within 6 months. "The client's gonna love these numbers because they're based on real data, not marketing fantasy." My stomach dropped. Those were my exact projections, calculated from weeks of research and analysis. Victoria was presenting my work to someone, but not as my work. She was speaking about it as if she had developed the strategy herself. What really sets this apart is the human element. Her voice carried through the door. "We're not just targeting small business owners. We're connecting with people who understand the daily struggle of building something from nothing. The micro-influencer partnerships aren't just about reach, they're about genuine relatability." I stood frozen in the hallway, coffee mug trembling in my hand. This was my strategy, my language, my months of work being presented as someone else's brilliance. But to whom? And why? "I think this campaign could be a game changer for TechFlow," Victoria continued. "More importantly, it positions us as the agency that truly understands authentic marketing in the digital age. This kind of strategic thinking is exactly what sets us apart from our competitors." The realization hit me like ice water. She wasn't discussing my strategy, she was stealing it, presenting it as her own work to someone who clearly had decision-making power over the TechFlow account. My breakthrough moment, my promotion-winning strategy, my months of sleepless nights and weekend research were being claimed by the person who was supposed to be advocating for my career advancement. I stood there in the hallway, listening to my boss systematically steal my future, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. The excitement I'd carried into the office that morning curdled into something harder, sharper. This wasn't just professional theft. It was a betrayal that cut to the core of everything I believed about merit, hard work, and loyalty. The presentation is ready for this afternoon, Victoria was saying. TechFlow's leadership team is going to be impressed. This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking they've been looking for. My presentation, my strategy, my future being packaged and delivered as her achievement. I backed away from her door, mind racing with implications. If Victoria presented my strategy as her own work, she would get credit for the TechFlow account's success. She would be seen as the strategic mastermind behind what could become our agency's signature campaign. And I would remain exactly where I was, a capable but unremarkable team member who assisted on important projects but never led them. The senior strategist position I'd been working toward would go to someone else, probably someone Victoria deemed more worthy of advancement. The salary increase, the equity options, the professional recognition, all of it would disappear because my own boss had decided my ideas were too good to let me have credit for them. I walked back to my desk on unsteady legs, my coffee now cold and forgotten. Around me, the office buzzed with normal Thursday morning energy. My colleagues were discussing weekend plans, debating lunch options, and handling routine client requests. None of them knew that my entire career trajectory had just been derailed by the person who was supposed to be my advocate and mentor. Opening my laptop, I stared at the presentation file that had taken me 3 months to perfect. Every slide now felt like evidence of my own naivety. I had trusted Victoria with my best work, believing that success would be shared, that credit would be given where credit was due. Instead, I had handed her the tools to steal my future. The morning crawled by with agonizing normalcy. Victoria emerged from her office around 11:30, looking pleased and energetic. She stopped by my desk with her usual professional smile, asking about my weekend plans, and commenting on how excited she was about our TechFlow presentation that afternoon. "This could be a really big moment for the team," she said, her tone warm and encouraging. "I have a feeling this presentation is going to open a lot of doors." I managed to nod and smile appropriately, but inside I was screaming. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She was talking about my work, my strategy, my months of effort, as if it belonged to both of us. Or worse, as if it belonged primarily to her. The casual way she claimed ownership of my ideas, while looking me directly in the eye, was breathtaking in its audacity. "I've been thinking about the next steps," Victoria continued, leaning against my desk in the casual manner she used when she wanted to seem approachable. "If TechFlow moves forward with this campaign, it's going to require really careful execution. We'll need someone detail-oriented to handle the day-to-day management while I focus on the strategic oversight." The implication was clear. Even if my strategy succeeded, I would be relegated to execution while she took credit for the strategic thinking. I would be the worker bee implementing someone else's brilliant ideas. Ideas that were actually mine to begin with. "That sounds great," I heard myself saying, my voice steady, despite the fury building inside me. "I'm excited to see how it all develops." Victoria smiled and patted my shoulder in what was probably meant to be an encouraging gesture. "You're such a team player, Emma. That's exactly the attitude that's going to take you far in this industry." As she walked away, I realized that my entire relationship with Victoria had been based on a fundamental misunderstanding. I had thought we were building something together, that my hard work and innovative thinking would be recognized and rewarded. Instead, I had been providing raw material for her career advancement while my own remained stagnant. The afternoon presentation was scheduled for 2 o'clock in our main conference room. TechFlow's CEO, Marketing Director, and Head of Business Development would be attending via video call, with Victoria presenting our comprehensive strategy for their approval. My strategy, delivered as her achievement, would determine not just the client relationship, but the trajectory of my professional future. I spent the lunch hour walking around downtown Austin, trying to process what I had discovered and decide how to respond. The November air was crisp and energizing, but I felt numb, disconnected from the bustling energy of the city I loved. Food trucks lined the streets, serving their regular crowds of tech workers and creative professionals, but I had no appetite. My mind was consumed with the realization that everything I thought I knew about my career was wrong. How long had this been happening? Were there other ideas, other strategies, other projects where Victoria had claimed credit for my work? Looking back, I could identify several instances where she had presented concepts that sounded suspiciously similar to suggestions I had made in private conversations. But I had always given her the benefit of the doubt, assuming that great minds think alike, or that my ideas had contributed to her strategic thinking in ways that were difficult to quantify. Now I understood that I had been systematically undermined by the person I trusted most in my professional life. Victoria hadn't been mentoring me or advocating for my advancement. She had been mining my creativity for her own benefit while keeping me in a subordinate position where I would continue generating ideas she could claim. The betrayal was complete and devastating. But as I walked back toward the office building, something else was crystallizing inside me. Anger, yes, but also a cold determination that felt entirely new. Victoria had stolen my ideas, my strategy, and my promotion. But she had also revealed exactly who she was and what she was capable of. And if she could steal from me, maybe it was time I learned what I was capable of stealing from her. The TechFlow presentation was scheduled to begin in 20 minutes, and I sat at my desk staring at the screen, my hands trembling slightly as I tried to focus on anything other than the fact that I was about to watch my career get hijacked in real time. The conference room was already prepared with fresh coffee, branded notebooks, and the large monitor that would connect us to TechFlow's leadership team. Victoria had spent the morning rehearsing, running through slides that contained my ideas, my research, my 3 months of sleepless dedication. I needed to talk to someone before I completely lost my mind. Sofia Rodriguez had been my closest friend since our sophomore year at UT, and now she worked as a corporate attorney for a firm that specialized in intellectual property disputes. If anyone would understand the legal and emotional implications of what I was experiencing, it would be her. I grabbed my phone and stepped outside onto the building's small balcony that overlooked downtown Austin. The November air was sharp and clear, cutting through the fog of disbelief that had been clouding my thoughts all morning. I dialed Sofia's number, praying she would be available between client meetings. "Emma, hey." Sofia's voice was warm but rushed. "What's up?" "I'm between depositions, but I have a few minutes." "Sofia, I think I'm having a professional crisis," I said, my voice shakier than I intended. "Actually, I know I'm having one. My boss just stole my promotion strategy and is about to present it as her own work to our biggest potential client." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Sofia had heard me complain about workplace frustrations before, but this was different, and she could clearly hear it in my tone. "Wait, slow down," she said, and I could hear her closing an office door. "Tell me exactly what happened. And don't leave out any details because this could be more serious than you realize." I explained everything. The 3 months of research, the innovative influencer strategy, the detailed ROI projections, the human element that made the campaign unique. I told her about overhearing Victoria's conversation, the way she had claimed every aspect of my work as her own strategic thinking, and how she was now preparing to present it to TechFlow without any acknowledgement of my contribution. "She's not just taking credit," I said, my voice growing stronger as I spoke. "She's positioning this as evidence of her strategic brilliance while I get relegated to implementation support. The promotion I've been working toward, the salary increase, the recognition, it's all disappearing because she decided my ideas were too good to let me have them." Sofia was quiet for a long moment, and I could hear her typing notes. As an intellectual property attorney, she understood the complexities of workplace idea theft better than most people. "Emma, what you're describing is serious," she finally said. "It's not just unethical. Depending on how your employment contract is structured, it could be legally actionable. But more importantly, you need to understand that this probably isn't the first time she's done this." That thought had been nagging at me all morning. How many conversations had we had where I shared preliminary ideas or strategic concepts? How many times had Victoria seemed unusually interested in my weekend brainstorming sessions or casual suggestions? Looking back, I could identify at least 4 projects where strategies I had developed in our private discussions had later emerged as her proposals. "What do I do?" I asked. "The presentation is in 15 minutes. Do I interrupt and claim credit? Do I let it happen and fight it afterward? Do I report it to HR and risk being labeled a troublemaker?" "You document everything," Sophia said firmly. "Right now, immediately. Every email, every conversation, every piece of research you did for this strategy. Print out drafts with timestamps. Save version histories. Screenshot any communications. Build a paper trail that proves your ownership of these ideas." She paused, then continued in the tone she used when advising clients on complex cases. "But Emma, here's what you need to understand. Even if you can prove the ideas were yours, Victoria has structural power that you don't. She's the senior director, she has relationships with leadership, and she can frame your claims as the complaints of a disgruntled employee who doesn't understand how collaborative work functions. So I'm supposed to just accept it?" The anger in my voice surprised me. Let her steal my future and pretend it's normal workplace politics? "No," Sophia said, and her tone shifted to something more personal, more protective. "You're supposed to be smarter than she is. You're supposed to recognize that this reveal tells you exactly who Victoria really is and what she's capable of. And then you're supposed to use that information strategically." I could hear voices in the background as people began gathering for the TechFlow presentation. My time was running out, but Sophia's words were crystallizing something important in my mind. "Victoria thinks you're naive enough to let this slide," Sophia continued. "She's counting on your loyalty, your team player attitude, your willingness to put the company's success ahead of your own recognition. But what if she's wrong? What if you're more strategic than she realizes?" The conference room door was opening, and I could see Victoria gesturing for me to join the presentation. She expected me to sit quietly, maybe take notes, possibly answer technical questions about implementation details, while she claimed credit for the strategic vision. "I have to go," I told Sophia. "The presentation is starting." "Emma, remember this," Sophia said quickly. "Victoria just showed you her playbook. She's not untouchable. She's just someone who's gotten comfortable taking credit for other people's work. That kind of person always has vulnerabilities." I hung up and walked back into the office, my mind racing but my expression carefully neutral. Victoria was adjusting her blazer and reviewing her notes one final time. She looked confident, energized, completely comfortable with what she was about to do. "Ready for this?" She asked me with a smile that now seemed predatory rather than encouraging. "I have a really good feeling about how this is going to go." I nodded and followed her into the conference room, where my stolen future was about to be presented as her achievement. Part 3, the foundation that's cracking the TechFlow presentation, went exactly as I feared it would. Victoria commanded the room with polished confidence, walking through my strategy as if she had personally developed every insight and innovation. She spoke passionately about the importance of authentic storytelling, explained the micro-influencer approach with sophisticated understanding, and fielded questions about ROI projections using the exact calculations I had spent weeks perfecting. TechFlow's leadership team was clearly impressed. Their CEO, Michael Chen, asked thoughtful questions about scalability and long-term brand positioning. Their marketing director, Janet Powell, wanted to know about the research methodology behind our demographic targeting. Their head of business development, Kevin Torres, was particularly interested in the competitive analysis that showed how our approach would differentiate them from similar companies in their space. Victoria answered every question flawlessly because she was using my research, my insights, my months of preparation. She had studied my work so thoroughly that she could discuss any aspect of the strategy with authority and detail. Watching her present my ideas as her own strategic brilliance was like witnessing a masterclass in professional theft. "This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking we've been looking for," Michael Chen said during the video call. "The strategy demonstrates a deep understanding of our market and our challenges. We're excited to move forward with Pinnacle on this campaign." Victoria practically glowed with satisfaction. She thanked the TechFlow team for their confidence, outlined next steps for contract negotiations, and promised to personally oversee the campaign's development and execution. As the call ended, she turned to me with a smile that I now recognized as completely artificial. "Great teamwork," she said, as if I had contributed anything more than silent presence during the presentation. "This is going to be an incredible project for all of us." The casual way she dismissed my role while claiming my work was breathtaking. But what truly shocked me was how natural it seemed to her, how comfortable she was with the deception. This wasn't a moment of opportunistic theft. It was a practiced routine. That evening, I sat in my converted loft apartment in Austin's Arts District, surrounded by printed emails, research documents, and draft presentations that told the complete story of my TechFlow strategy development. Sophia's advice about documentation had been crucial, and now I had a comprehensive timeline that proved my ownership of every idea Victoria had claimed. The apartment felt different that night, as if the betrayal had changed the very air around me. I had chosen this space specifically because it represented independence and creative energy. The exposed brick walls, the large windows that looked out over the vibrant neighborhood, the carefully curated collection of marketing books and industry publications, everything had been chosen to reflect my professional ambitions and personal growth. Now it all felt hollow, like stage dressing for a life that wasn't developing the way I had planned. I poured myself a glass of wine and tried to understand how I had been so blind to Victoria's true nature. Our professional relationship had begun 3 years ago when I joined Pinnacle Marketing fresh from completing my MBA at UT's Macomb School of Business. Victoria had been the senior director who interviewed me, and I remembered being impressed by her confidence, her strategic thinking, and her apparent commitment to developing junior talent. During that interview, she had spoken passionately about the importance of mentorship and collaboration in building successful marketing teams. "I believe the best leaders are those who help others achieve their potential," she had said, looking directly at me with what seemed like genuine enthusiasm. "My job isn't just to manage campaigns. It's to develop the next generation of strategic thinkers who will shape this industry." Those words had meant everything to me. Coming from an academic background where excellence was recognized and rewarded based on merit, I was eager to work for someone who valued talent development and collaborative success. Victoria had seemed like the perfect mentor for an ambitious young professional who wanted to make a meaningful impact in the marketing world. During my first year at Pinnacle, Victoria had been encouraging and supportive. She assigned me to interesting projects, provided constructive feedback on my work, and included me in strategic discussions that helped me understand the broader business context of our campaigns. When I suggested new approaches or identified potential improvements to existing strategies, she listened thoughtfully and often implemented my recommendations. But looking back now, I could see the pattern that had been developing. Victoria would ask probing questions about my ideas, encouraging me to develop them more fully. She would request detailed explanations of my thinking, asking me to create comprehensive analyses of potential strategies or market opportunities. At the time, I had interpreted this as mentorship, a senior leader helping me develop my analytical skills and strategic thinking. Instead, it had been market research. Victoria had been systematically harvesting my creativity, taking my preliminary ideas and developing them into presentations she could claim as her own work. The encouragement and support I had valued so highly had been manipulation designed to extract maximum value from my thinking while ensuring I remained in a subordinate position. The realization was devastating, because it meant that nearly everything I believed about my professional growth had been an illusion. The positive feedback, the increasing responsibilities, the hints about future advancement, all of it had been carefully calculated to keep me productive and loyal while Victoria built her reputation on my ideas. I opened my laptop and began scrolling through 3 years of email correspondence with Victoria. The evidence was overwhelming once I knew what to look for. Conversations where I had shared innovative concepts that later appeared in her client presentations. Strategy sessions where my suggestions had been incorporated into proposals she submitted under her name. Project debriefs where she had asked detailed questions about my approach, only to present similar methodologies to other clients without acknowledgement. The TechFlow strategy theft wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of a 3-year pattern of systematic idea appropriation. Victoria had built her entire reputation as a strategic innovator by claiming credit for concepts developed by her subordinates. She was successful not because of her own brilliance, but because she was skilled at identifying and harvesting the best thinking from her team, while ensuring the original creators never received recognition. One email exchange particularly caught my attention. 8 months ago, I had developed a comprehensive social media strategy for a lifestyle brand that focused on community building through user-generated content. The approach was innovative because it treated customers as brand ambassadors rather than passive consumers, creating authentic engagement that drove both loyalty and acquisition. Victoria had asked me to present the strategy to her privately before we pitched it to the client. She had been enthusiastic about the concept, asking detailed questions about implementation, budget requirements, and potential scalability. But when we met with the client the following week, Victoria presented the strategy as her own work, describing it as an evolution of her previous thinking about community-driven marketing. The client loved the approach and signed a 6-month contract that became one of our most successful campaigns. Victoria received recognition from company leadership for her innovative strategy, and the case study she wrote about the campaign's success was published in a prominent marketing journal. My contribution was mentioned only as excellent execution support in the acknowledgments. At the time, I had been disappointed but not suspicious. I assumed that was how agency work functioned. Junior staff developed ideas that senior leaders refined and presented. I told myself that my contribution would be remembered and valued, even if it wasn't publicly acknowledged. Now I understood that I had been systematically exploited by someone who had perfected the art of intellectual theft. Victoria's entire career had been built on taking credit for other people's innovations, while maintaining the appearance of being a supportive and collaborative leader. The most infuriating part was how obvious it should have been. Victoria rarely generated original ideas during brainstorming sessions, instead asking probing questions that guided others toward creative solutions she could later claim. She never shared her own strategic thinking during the development phase, preferring to let team members explore possibilities while she observed and collected. And she was always eager to present final strategies to clients, positioning herself as the primary architect of successful campaigns. I had been the perfect victim, talented, ambitious, and naive enough to believe that hard work and innovation would be naturally rewarded. Victoria had exploited my trust, my dedication, and my genuine desire to contribute meaningfully to our team's success. But as I sat there reviewing the evidence of her systematic betrayal, I realized something important was shifting inside me. The devastation and disbelief were giving way to something colder and more calculating. Victoria had revealed exactly who she was and how she operated. She had shown me that loyalty and collaboration were weaknesses she exploited rather than values she shared. If she could steal my ideas and claim my achievements, maybe it was time I learned what I was capable of taking from her. Part 4. The price of loyalty. The next morning brought an email that made Victoria's theft even more devastating. Michael Chen from TechFlow had sent a message directly to Victoria, copying the company's executive team, praising her innovative strategic thinking and deep understanding of authentic marketing principles. The email described her as exactly the kind of visionary partner we need to transform our brand presence, and mentioned that TechFlow would be recommending Pinnacle Marketing to other companies in their portfolio. Victoria had forwarded the email to our entire team with a note about the importance of collaborative excellence and strategic innovation. Reading it felt like watching someone else receive an award for a race I had run. The praise, the recognition, the professional validation, everything I had worked toward, was being celebrated as Victoria's achievement. But the email also contained information that made the betrayal feel even more personal. TechFlow was planning to expand their marketing budget significantly based on the strength of the strategy Victoria had presented. They were discussing a 12-month campaign that could be worth over $200,000 in revenue for Pinnacle. More importantly, they wanted Victoria to personally lead a marketing workshop for their entire leadership team, positioning her as a thought leader in authentic digital marketing. This was career-defining success built entirely on my stolen work. Victoria would receive not just the immediate recognition, but the long-term reputation benefits that came from being associated with breakthrough strategic thinking. She would be invited to speak at industry conferences, write articles for marketing publications, and consult with other companies seeking similar innovation. My 3 months of research and creativity would become the foundation for years of professional advancement that I would never receive. I had given Victoria everything. Not just the TechFlow strategy, but 3 years of loyalty, dedication, and trust that she had systematically exploited for her own benefit. I had stayed late to refine presentations she would claim as her own work. I had shared insights and innovations that became the building blocks of her reputation. I had even covered for her during client meetings when she was unprepared, helping maintain the image of competence that allowed her to continue stealing credit for other people's ideas. The price of my loyalty had been my own professional future. While I focused on doing excellent work and trusting that merit would be rewarded, Victoria had focused on positioning herself to claim credit for that excellence. She understood that in the corporate world, perception often mattered more than reality, and she had carefully managed perceptions to ensure her success came at my expense. But my loyalty had cost me more than just professional recognition. It had cost me my understanding of how the business world actually worked. I had believed in collaboration, mentorship, and shared success, because those were the values Victoria claimed to embrace. I had assumed that good work would speak for itself, because that's what I had been taught in school, and what Victoria had told me during my early days at Pinnacle. Instead, I had learned that success often depended more on strategic positioning than actual achievement. Victoria's reputation wasn't built on her own innovations. It was built on her ability to identify valuable ideas and claim ownership of them. She had succeeded by being ruthless while appearing collaborative, by stealing credit while maintaining the image of being supportive. That afternoon, I received a text message from Derek Martinez, Victoria's husband, asking if I was free for coffee. Derek and I had met several times at company social events, and I had always found him thoughtful and genuinely interested in the creative aspects of marketing work. As an architect who specialized in sustainable design, he understood the challenges of translating innovative concepts into practical implementation. "Emma, I hope this isn't weird," Derek had written, "but Victoria mentioned how instrumental you were in developing the TechFlow strategy. I'd love to hear more about your approach. I'm working on a project that could benefit from similar thinking about authentic community engagement." The message was both validating and confusing. Victoria had apparently acknowledged my contribution to Derek while completely erasing it from the professional presentation. She was willing to give me private credit while ensuring I received no public recognition or career benefit. I agreed to meet Derek at Radio Coffee on South End, a popular spot where creative professionals often gathered to work and network. The cafe was busy with the usual mix of freelancers, startup employees, and artists that made Austin's creative economy so vibrant. Derek was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with his laptop and a stack of architectural drawings. "Thanks for meeting me," he said, standing to give me a friendly hug. "I ordered you a cortado. Victoria mentioned it's your favorite." Derek was different from what I had expected based on Victoria's descriptions of their relationship. She often spoke about him as if he were a successful but somewhat predictable partner who provided stability while she focused on her high-powered career. In person, he was more thoughtful and engaging, asking genuine questions about my work and listening carefully to my responses. "Victoria told me you developed the community engagement framework for the TechFlow campaign," he said as we settled into our conversation. "I'm working with a neighborhood group that wants to revitalize a historic district, and I think your approach to authentic storytelling could be really valuable." I was careful about how I responded, not wanting to create problems between Victoria and Derek, but also not wanting to downplay my actual contribution to the strategy. "It was definitely a collaborative effort," I said diplomatically, "but yes, I did a lot of the research on community-driven marketing approaches." Derek nodded thoughtfully. "That makes sense. Victoria mentioned that you have a real gift for understanding how people connect with brands on an emotional level. She said the TechFlow strategy succeeded because you figured out how to make a software company feel human and relatable." The conversation was surreal. Derek was giving me credit that Victoria had completely erased from the professional context. She had apparently told her husband the truth about my contributions while lying to everyone else about the source of her strategic innovations. "The research was fascinating," I said, deciding to be more open about my actual role. "I spent weeks interviewing small business owners, understanding their real challenges and the language they use when talking about productivity struggles. The whole strategy came from recognizing that TechFlow needed to show up as a partner in their journey rather than just another software vendor. Derek's eyes lit up with genuine interest. That's exactly what we need for this neighborhood project. The residents don't want to feel like they're being marketed to. They want to feel like their voices are being heard and their experiences are being honored. We spent the next hour discussing community engagement strategies, authentic storytelling approaches, and the psychology of building trust through marketing. Derek was an excellent collaborator, asking insightful questions and offering perspectives from his architectural work that helped me think about marketing in new ways. But underneath our productive conversation, I was processing the strange reality of getting credit from Victoria's husband while being erased from her professional narrative. Derek clearly respected my strategic thinking and understood my actual contribution to the TechFlow success. Victoria had been honest with him about my capabilities while lying to everyone else about my role. "I hope this isn't overstepping," Derek said as our conversation wound down, "but have you ever considered starting your own consulting practice? The way you think about authentic engagement is exactly what a lot of organizations need right now." The suggestion caught me off guard. I had been so focused on advancing within Pinnacle that I hadn't seriously considered independent consulting as a career path. But Derek's confidence in my abilities was refreshing after months of having my contributions minimized and stolen. "Victoria's lucky to have someone with your strategic insight on her team," he continued. "I'm sure she's working hard to make sure you get the recognition you deserve." I managed to smile and thank him for the encouraging words, but inside I was screaming. Victoria wasn't working to ensure I got recognition. She was working to ensure I never received it. She was stealing my ideas, claiming my achievements, and building her reputation on my innovations while keeping me in a subordinate position where I would continue generating value she could claim. But Derek's genuine appreciation for my work was crystallizing something important. Victoria's theft had been possible because I had limited my audience to her approval. I had shared my best thinking with someone who exploited it rather than celebrated it. I had trusted my career development to someone who benefited from keeping me subordinate. What if I had been thinking too small? What if instead of fighting for recognition within Victoria's framework, I needed to build my own framework? What if the person who had stolen my promotion ideas was about to discover that I was capable of stealing something much more valuable from her? As I walked back to my apartment that evening, Derek's words about independent consulting kept echoing in my mind. Victoria had succeeded by claiming other people's innovations, but she had also revealed that those innovations were valuable enough to build a career on. If my ideas were worth stealing, maybe they were worth more than I had realized. Maybe it was time to find out exactly how much they were worth, and to whom. Part 5, the catalyst for change. The opportunity came from an unexpected source 3 days later. I was grabbing lunch at the food truck park near our office when my phone rang with a call from Marcus Webb, my former professor from UT's McCombs School of Business. Marcus had been my favorite instructor during graduate school, teaching an advanced course on strategic marketing innovation that had fundamentally shaped how I approached campaign development. "Emma, I hope you don't mind me calling out of the blue," Marcus said, his familiar voice bringing back memories of late-night study sessions and breakthrough moments in his classroom. "I just read an interesting case study about a social media strategy for tech companies, and the approach reminded me so much of the framework you developed for your thesis project." My stomach dropped. Marcus was clearly referring to the TechFlow campaign, which Victoria had already begun promoting as an example of innovative strategic thinking. The case study he mentioned was probably the article Victoria was planning to submit to Marketing Innovation Quarterly, positioning herself as the architect of a revolutionary approach to B2B social media marketing. The community-driven engagement model, the micro-influencer partnerships, the focus on authentic storytelling, it's exactly the kind of human-centered marketing you were passionate about in school, Marcus continued. "I assume you were involved in developing this strategy?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Marcus knew my work well enough to recognize my strategic thinking, but he was also clearly assuming I had received appropriate credit for my contributions. How could I explain that my former professor was reading about my stolen ideas without sounding like a bitter employee making excuses? "It's complicated," I said finally, walking away from the food trucks to find a quieter space. "The strategy does build on concepts I developed, but the professional context is different from academic work." Marcus was quiet for a moment, and I could hear him thinking through my careful response. As someone who had spent decades in both academic and consulting environments, he understood the complex dynamics of idea ownership in corporate settings. "Emma, I'm calling because I have a proposition that might interest you," he said, his tone shifting to something more business-focused. "I'm launching an independent consulting practice focused on authentic marketing strategies for mid-sized companies. The approach I'm developing is based on exactly the kind of human-centered thinking you specialized in during your graduate work." He paused, then continued with growing enthusiasm. "I need a strategic partner who understands how to translate innovative concepts into practical implementation. Someone who can develop comprehensive campaigns that actually work in real-world business environments. Based on what I remember of your capabilities and what I'm seeing in this case study, you might be exactly who I'm looking for." The offer was simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. Marcus was proposing a complete departure from my current career path, an opportunity to build something new, rather than fighting for recognition within Victoria's system. But it also meant leaving the security of Pinnacle, giving up the promotion I had been working toward, and taking a significant financial risk to pursue an uncertain future. "What exactly are you envisioning?" I asked, my mind racing through possibilities and implications. "A boutique consulting firm that specializes in helping companies develop authentic engagement strategies," Marcus explained. "Not the superficial authenticity that most agencies sell, but genuine community-building approaches that create lasting relationships between brands and customers. The kind of work that requires deep research, strategic thinking, and creative implementation." He described a business model that would allow us to work with companies that were genuinely committed to authentic marketing, rather than just looking for tactical, quick fixes. We would have the freedom to develop innovative strategies without worrying about internal politics or credit theft. More importantly, we would build our reputation on our actual work rather than depending on others to recognize our contributions. "The initial investment would be minimal," Marcus continued. "I have relationships with several companies that are already interested in this approach. What we need is someone who can develop and execute strategies that deliver measurable results. Someone who understands both the strategic framework and the practical details of modern digital marketing." The opportunity was exactly what I had been working toward without realizing it. Instead of fighting for advancement within a system that rewarded theft over innovation, I could build a system that valued actual strategic thinking. Instead of trusting others to give me credit for my work, I could create an environment where my contributions would be inherently recognized. But accepting Marcus's offer would mean more than just changing jobs. It would mean acknowledging that my entire approach to career development had been fundamentally flawed. I had believed that excellence would be naturally rewarded, that good work would speak for itself, and that loyalty would be reciprocated. Instead, I had learned that success often required more strategic thinking about positioning and credit than about actual performance. "I need some time to think about this," I told Marcus, though every instinct was screaming at me to accept immediately. "Of course," he said. "But Emma, don't spend too much time thinking. Opportunities like this, don't wait for perfect timing. Sometimes the best career decisions are the ones that feel scary but align with who you actually want to become." After hanging up, I sat in my car for 20 minutes, processing the implications of Marcus's offer. This was my chance to escape Victoria's exploitation, to build something meaningful with someone who actually valued my contributions. But it was also a complete departure from the safe, predictable path I had been following. That evening, I called Sophia to discuss the opportunity and get her perspective on the legal and financial implications of leaving Pinnacle to start an independent consulting practice. "Emma, this is exactly what you need," Sophia said without hesitation. "You've been trying to succeed within a system that's rigged against you. Victoria has all the structural advantages: seniority, established relationships, institutional credibility. But in an independent practice, your actual capabilities matter more than office politics." She was right, but leaving Pinnacle would also mean giving up the salary, benefits, and professional security I had worked 3 years to build. Starting a consulting practice was risky, especially in a competitive market like Austin, where dozens of marketing agencies were fighting for the same clients. "What about the TechFlow strategy?" I asked. "Victoria is already using it to build her reputation." Won't potential clients assume that innovative thinking came from her rather than from a junior employee they've never heard of? Sophia laughed, but not unkindly. Emma, you're still thinking like someone who believes the game is fair. Victoria stole your strategy. But she also revealed that your strategic thinking is valuable enough to build a career on. Instead of fighting her for credit, why not prove that you can develop even better strategies for her competitors? The idea was audacious and appealing. Instead of trying to reclaim recognition for work Victoria had already stolen, I could demonstrate my capabilities by developing new innovations that would overshadow anything she could claim. I could turn her theft into evidence of my value rather than proof of my victimization. Besides, Sophia continued, Victoria's success is built on stolen ideas. What happens when she runs out of people to steal from? What happens when she has to generate original strategic thinking instead of appropriating it from her subordinates? People who succeed through theft are always vulnerable to being outperformed by the people they've stolen from. That night, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. I would accept Marcus's offer and leave Pinnacle to start an independent consulting practice. I would stop fighting for recognition within Victoria's system and start building my own system, where my contributions would be inherently valued. But I would also make sure Victoria understood exactly what she was losing. If she wanted to steal my promotion ideas, she was about to discover that I was capable of stealing something much more valuable from her. Her reputation, her clients, and maybe even her marriage were all built on foundations that were less stable than she realized. The game was changing, and this time, I would be the one setting the rules. The foundation of everything I believed about professional relationships began crumbling the moment I started investigating Victoria's pattern of behavior. That weekend, I drove to my parents' house in Round Rock, needing space to process what I had discovered and to access resources that might help me understand the full scope of Victoria's systematic theft. My father, Robert Chen, had spent 30 years as a patent attorney before retiring, and my mother, Linda, had been a business consultant specializing in organizational ethics. If anyone could help me understand the legal and professional implications of what Victoria had been doing, it would be them. But explaining the situation meant admitting that I had been naive enough to trust someone who had been exploiting me for 3 years. "Sweetheart, you look exhausted," my mother said as I walked into their kitchen, where the familiar smell of her weekend cooking projects usually provided comfort. Today, even the warm atmosphere felt distant, as if the betrayal had created a barrier between me and everything that had previously felt safe. I told them everything. The TechFlow strategy theft, the pattern of idea appropriation I had discovered, the systematic way Victoria had positioned herself to claim credit for innovations she hadn't developed. My parents listened without interruption, occasionally exchanging glances that suggested they understood implications I was still processing. "Emma," my father said carefully when I finished, "what you're describing isn't just workplace politics. This is intellectual property theft on a systematic level. If Victoria has been claiming credit for strategies you developed, she's essentially building her career on fraudulent claims about her own capabilities." He pulled out a legal pad and began sketching a timeline based on the information I had provided. As a patent attorney, he understood the complexities of proving ownership of intellectual property, but he also recognized the challenges of pursuing legal action in a corporate environment where power dynamics favored senior employees. "The problem is that most marketing strategies don't qualify for formal intellectual property protection," he continued. "Unlike patents or copyrights, business strategies exist in a gray area where ownership is difficult to establish legally. Victoria knows this, which is why she's comfortable stealing ideas that would be protected in other industries." My mother was more direct in her assessment. "Victoria is a predator," she said bluntly. "She's identified talented subordinates and created a system that allows her to extract maximum value from their creativity while ensuring they never receive recognition that might threaten her position." The clinical accuracy of my mother's analysis was both validating and devastating. I had spent 3 years believing I was building a collaborative professional relationship with someone who valued my contributions. Instead, I had been providing raw material for someone who had perfected the art of exploitation. "What's particularly insidious," my mother continued, "is that Victoria has probably convinced herself that her behavior is normal. She likely believes that claiming credit for her team's work is simply effective leadership. People who systematically exploit others often develop elaborate justifications for their behavior. We spent the rest of the afternoon documenting everything I could remember about my professional relationship with Victoria. Every stolen idea, every claimed strategy, every instance where my contributions had been minimized or erased. The pattern was overwhelming once we laid it out chronologically. Victoria hadn't just stolen the TechFlow strategy. She had been systematically appropriating my work since my first month at Pinnacle. The most damaging realization was that Victoria's entire reputation as an innovative strategist was built on stolen ideas. The campaign that had won her recognition at the Austin Marketing Awards last year was based on a community engagement framework I had developed. The case study she had published in Marketing Today featured strategies I had created during what I thought were collaborative brainstorming sessions. Even her speaking engagements at industry conferences were built on presentations that incorporated concepts I had originated. "She's not actually a strategic thinker," I said, the understanding hitting me like cold water. "She's just someone who's good at identifying valuable ideas and claiming ownership of them." My father nodded grimly. "That's exactly right. And that's also her greatest vulnerability. People who succeed through theft rather than innovation eventually run out of people to steal from." Victoria's success is entirely dependent on having talented subordinates whose work she can appropriate. The conversation shifted to practical considerations about my options for response. Pursuing legal action would be expensive, time-consuming, and ultimately unlikely to succeed, given the difficulty of proving ownership of marketing strategies. Reporting Victoria to HR would put me in the position of making accusations against a senior employee with established credibility and institutional relationships. "What about going to her superiors directly?" I asked. "If I can prove that Victoria has been claiming credit for work she didn't do, wouldn't that damage her credibility?" My mother shook her head. "Victoria's superiors have been promoting her based on her apparent strategic innovations. Admitting that those innovations were stolen would mean acknowledging that they failed to recognize systematic fraud happening under their supervision. They have incentives to dismiss your claims rather than investigate them thoroughly." The systemic nature of the problem was becoming clear. Victoria's theft had been enabled by an organizational structure that rewarded claimed achievements without investigating their actual origins. She had succeeded because she understood that perception often mattered more than reality in corporate environments. But my parents also helped me understand that Victoria's systematic exploitation had given me something valuable: a complete education in how she operated, what she valued, and where her vulnerabilities might be. I knew her methods, her relationships, and her dependencies better than anyone else because I had been her primary victim. "Emma," my father said as our conversation wound down, "you have to decide whether you want to fight Victoria within her system or build your own system where her advantages don't matter. Either choice is valid, but they require completely different strategies." That night, lying in my childhood bedroom, I realized that my entire understanding of professional success had been fundamentally naive. I had believed that merit would be naturally recognized, that good work would speak for itself, and that loyalty would be reciprocated. Instead, I had learned that success often depended more on strategic positioning than actual achievement. Victoria had succeeded not because she was exceptionally talented, but because she was exceptionally strategic about claiming credit for other people's talents. She understood that in many corporate environments, the person who presents an idea gets more credit than the person who develops it. She had built her entire career on this understanding, while I had remained focused on the actual work rather than the political dynamics around it. But I had also learned something that Victoria didn't realize. Her success was entirely dependent on having access to people whose work she could steal. Without subordinates generating innovative strategies she could claim, Victoria would be exposed as someone who lacked the creative and strategic capabilities she had built her reputation on. The next morning, I drove back to Austin with a new understanding of both my situation and my options. Victoria had stolen my ideas and damaged my career, but she had also revealed exactly how her system worked and where its weaknesses were. She had taught me, accidentally, everything I needed to know about succeeding through strategic positioning rather than just hard work. If she could steal my promotion ideas, maybe it was time I learned what I was capable of stealing from her. Part 4, The Price of Loyalty, continued. Monday morning brought another devastating blow that crystallized exactly how much my loyalty to Victoria had cost me. I arrived at the office to find an email from our company's CEO, James Morrison, announcing that Victoria had been selected to lead a new strategic innovation initiative. The position came with a substantial salary increase, equity options, and the responsibility for developing cutting-edge marketing approaches for all of Pinnacle's major clients. The email praised Victoria's consistently innovative thinking and her proven ability to develop strategies that deliver exceptional results. It specifically mentioned the TechFlow campaign as evidence of her strategic brilliance, and noted that she would be presenting our agency's approach at the upcoming National Marketing Conference in Denver. Reading that email felt like watching my entire future being handed to someone else. The strategic innovation role was exactly the kind of position I had been working toward, the natural progression for someone who specialized in developing creative campaign approaches. Victoria would now have the platform, resources, and recognition to build a national reputation as a marketing innovator, all based on strategies she had stolen from me and other team members. But what made the announcement particularly painful was the realization that my loyalty had been the foundation of Victoria's success. Every late night I had spent refining strategies she would present as her own work. Every weekend I had spent researching innovative approaches she would claim as her strategic thinking. Every client meeting where I had provided supporting expertise while she took credit for the overall vision. I had been so focused on being a valuable team member that I had failed to recognize I was being systematically exploited by someone who had no intention of sharing credit or advancing my career. My dedication had become the raw material for Victoria's advancement, while my own professional growth remained stagnant. The office buzzed with congratulations for Victoria throughout the morning. Colleagues stopped by her office to praise her promotion and express excitement about working on the Strategic Innovation Initiative. Several people mentioned how much they looked forward to learning from her proven expertise in developing breakthrough campaigns. Victoria accepted the praise with gracious humility, talking about the importance of teamwork and collaborative excellence. She made several references to how much she valued the contributions of her team members and how excited she was to help develop the next generation of strategic thinkers. The performance was masterful and completely fraudulent. Around noon, Victoria stopped by my desk with what appeared to be genuine enthusiasm about including me in her new initiative. "Emma, I want you to be one of the first people I bring onto the strategic innovation team," she said, her tone suggesting she was offering me a tremendous opportunity. "Your attention to detail and research capabilities would be incredibly valuable as we develop new approaches for our major clients." The offer was simultaneously tempting and insulting. Victoria was essentially asking me to continue providing the raw material for strategies she would claim as her own work, except now with the formal title of Strategic Innovation Director. I would have a front-row seat to watch her build a national reputation on ideas I developed while receiving credit only for research support and detailed implementation. "That sounds like an interesting opportunity," I said carefully, not wanting to reveal how much I understood about her actual methods. "What would my role be, specifically?" Victoria's explanation confirmed everything I suspected. She wanted me to conduct deep research into emerging marketing trends, analyze competitor strategies, and develop comprehensive campaign frameworks that she could refine and present to clients. My work would be positioned as valuable supporting research, while her presentations of that research would be positioned as strategic innovation. "I think you have real potential as a strategic thinker," Victoria said, her tone conveying what was probably meant to be encouraging mentorship. "This role would give you the chance to learn how to translate innovative concepts into business results while working closely with our most important clients." The condescension was breathtaking. Victoria was offering to teach me how to do work I had already been doing for 3 years, except now I would do it within a framework that formally acknowledged her as the strategic innovator while I remained a supporting researcher. She was systematizing the exploitation she had been practicing informally while making it sound like career development. "I appreciate the offer," I said. "Can I have some time to think about it?" Victoria looked surprised, as if she couldn't imagine why I wouldn't immediately accept what she obviously considered a generous opportunity. "Of course, but I hope you'll be enthusiastic about moving forward." This kind of chance doesn't come around often, especially for someone at your career stage. The implicit threat was clear. Victoria was offering me the choice between continuing to provide material for her success within a formal structure or being excluded from the strategic work that interested me most. She was confident that I would choose collaboration over confrontation because that had been my pattern for 3 years. After Victoria returned to her office, I sat at my desk processing the full scope of what my loyalty had cost me. Not just the immediate theft of the TechFlow strategy, but 3 years of systematic exploitation that had positioned Victoria for career advancement I would never receive. She had built her entire reputation on my ideas while ensuring I remained dependent on her approval for any recognition of my contributions. The strategic innovation role should have been mine. I had developed the innovative approaches Victoria was being celebrated for creating. I had the creative capabilities, research skills, and strategic thinking that the position required. But Victoria had ensured that my contributions were always presented as supporting work rather than strategic leadership, making it impossible for me to be considered for advancement to roles that required demonstrated innovation. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek Martinez asking if I was free for lunch. Since our coffee meeting the previous week, Derek had reached out several times with questions about community engagement strategies and authentic marketing approaches. Our conversations had been refreshingly collaborative, with Derek treating my insights as valuable professional expertise, rather than raw material for someone else's success. "I hope this isn't presumptuous," Derek's text read, "but I wanted to celebrate your contribution to Victoria's promotion. She told me the strategic innovation role came partly because of the TechFlow campaign, and I know how much your research and thinking contributed to that success." The message was both validating and heartbreaking. Derek recognized my actual contribution to Victoria's advancement, but he was celebrating it as evidence of successful collaboration rather than systematic theft. Victoria had apparently told him enough truth about my capabilities to explain her success while maintaining the fiction that credit was being appropriately shared. I agreed to meet Derek at Laundrette, a popular restaurant in East Austin, where the creative energy of the neighborhood matched my need for a change of scenery. The lunch rush was in full swing, with the usual mix of tech entrepreneurs, artists, and marketing professionals that made Austin's food scene so vibrant. Derek was already seated when I arrived, looking thoughtful as he reviewed what appeared to be planning documents for his architectural projects. He stood to greet me with genuine warmth, the kind of professional respect I had been craving from my actual workplace. "Congratulations on Victoria's promotion," he said as we settled into our conversation. "She mentioned that your research framework was crucial to the strategic thinking that impressed the executive team." I managed to smile and thank him, though internally I was processing the strange reality of receiving secondhand credit for my own work. Victoria had apparently told Derek enough about my contributions to justify their success, while ensuring that credit remained within her control. "Actually," Derek continued, "I wanted to discuss something that might interest you. The neighborhood revitalization project I mentioned has evolved into something much larger. We're now working with a consortium of local businesses that want to develop authentic community engagement strategies." He explained that the project had grown from a single historic district to a citywide initiative focused on supporting local businesses through genuine community building. The approach required exactly the kind of human-centered marketing strategies I had been developing, except applied to economic development rather than corporate campaigns. "The consortium is looking for a marketing strategist who can help develop authentic engagement approaches for small businesses," Derek said. "Someone who understands how to build real relationships between businesses and communities, rather than just increasing foot traffic or online metrics." The opportunity was intriguing and aligned perfectly with the research I had been conducting for the TechFlow campaign. But it was also another situation where I would be providing strategic thinking to advance someone else's project, while my own career remained stagnant. "What kind of role are you envisioning?" I asked, curious about whether this would be another exploitation situation disguised as professional development. Derek's response was refreshingly direct. "A strategic partnership, where you would develop the marketing framework and receive full credit for the intellectual property. The consortium understands that authentic community engagement requires genuine expertise, not just tactical implementation. The contrast with Victoria's offer was stark. Derek was proposing a collaboration, where my contributions would be inherently recognized because they would be formally attributed to me. Instead of providing raw material for someone else's reputation, I would be building my own professional credibility through work that aligned with my values and capabilities. The compensation would be competitive with senior marketing roles at established agencies, Derek continued. But more importantly, this would be your framework, your methodology, your professional reputation. The consortium wants someone who can become known as an expert in authentic community engagement. The opportunity was everything Victoria's strategic innovation role wasn't: recognition for my actual contributions, credit for my intellectual property, and the chance to build a reputation based on my own work rather than supporting someone else's claimed achievements. But accepting Derek's offer would mean leaving Pinnacle and giving up the security of my current position. It would also mean abandoning my efforts to receive recognition for the work Victoria had stolen, essentially allowing her theft to go unchallenged. This sounds like an incredible opportunity, I said carefully. Can I have some time to consider it? Derek nodded enthusiastically. Of course. But Emma, I want you to know that this offer is based on genuine respect for your capabilities. Victoria has mentioned how talented you are, but more importantly, I've seen your strategic thinking firsthand. You have exactly the kind of innovative approach this project needs. As we finished lunch and prepared to leave, Derek made one more comment that crystallized everything I had been processing about my situation with Victoria. You know, Emma, sometimes the best career moves are the ones that feel scary but align with who you actually want to become. You're clearly someone who cares about authentic work that makes a real difference. Maybe it's time to find an environment that values those priorities as much as you do. Walking back to my car, I realized that Derek had offered me something Victoria never would: the chance to succeed based on my actual contributions, rather than my willingness to let someone else claim credit for my work. The choice wasn't just between two different job opportunities. It was between two fundamentally different approaches to professional success. Victoria had taught me that success could be achieved through strategic positioning and systematic theft. Derek was offering me the chance to discover what I could achieve through recognized innovation and authentic collaboration. The question was whether I was ready to bet my career on my own capabilities rather than continuing to subsidize someone else's advancement with my undercredited work. Part 5. The Catalyst for Change. Continued. The decision crystallized 3 days later when Marcus Webb called with an update about his consulting practice that changed everything. I was working late on a campaign proposal for a local tech startup, one of the few projects where Victoria had allowed me to take primary responsibility, when my phone rang with Marcus's familiar number. Emma, I hope I'm not calling too late, Marcus said, his voice containing an energy I recognized from his most exciting classroom moments. I wanted to give you an update about the consulting practice and a new development that might accelerate our timeline. Marcus explained that his initial plan for a gradual launch had been disrupted by an unexpected opportunity. TechFlow Industries, the same company Victoria had won with my stolen strategy, had reached out to him directly after seeing his work featured in a marketing innovation publication. They're looking for a secondary strategic partner, Marcus continued. Apparently, they want to diversify their marketing approaches and work with multiple agencies to ensure they're getting the most innovative thinking available. My stomach dropped as I realized the implications. TechFlow was seeking additional marketing support because they were concerned about putting all their strategic eggs in one basket with Pinnacle. They had been impressed by Victoria's presentation, but they wanted to hedge their bets by working with other innovative strategists who could provide different perspectives. The interesting thing is, Marcus said, they specifically mentioned being interested in authentic community engagement strategies that focus on genuine relationship building rather than traditional conversion tactics. That's exactly the framework you developed for your thesis project. The irony was overwhelming. TechFlow was seeking the kind of strategic innovation I specialized in, because Victoria's stolen presentation had demonstrated the value of that approach. But they were looking for it from other sources because they couldn't get more of it from Pinnacle, where Victoria would have to continue stealing ideas to maintain her reputation as an innovator. Marcus, I need to tell you something about the TechFlow campaign, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. The strategy you read about wasn't developed by Victoria Hayes. It was my work, stolen and presented as her innovation. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Marcus had enough experience in both academic and business environments to understand the implications of what I was telling him. "Emma, that explains a lot," he said finally. "This strategy showed exactly the kind of thinking I remembered from your graduate work, but I couldn't figure out how someone else had developed such a similar approach." I explained the systematic nature of Victoria's theft, the pattern of idea appropriation I had discovered, and the recent promotion she had received based partly on my stolen work. Marcus listened without interruption, occasionally asking clarifying questions that helped me understand the full scope of what had been happening. "This is actually perfect," Marcus said when I finished, his tone shifting to something more strategic. "TechFlow is looking for innovative thinking that Victoria can't provide because she doesn't actually develop innovative strategies. They're seeking exactly what you can offer because you're the one who created the approach they're trying to find more of." The opportunity was both thrilling and terrifying. Working with Marcus would mean competing directly with Victoria for the same client, using the authentic version of strategies she had stolen to demonstrate the difference between genuine innovation and sophisticated theft. "But there's more," Marcus continued. "TechFlow isn't the only company that's been impressed by community-driven marketing approaches. I've had inquiries from 3 other organizations that want similar strategies. There's a real market for the kind of authentic engagement framework you developed." He outlined a business model that would allow us to build a practice specifically around human-centered marketing strategies that emphasized genuine relationship building over tactical manipulation. We would work with companies that were genuinely committed to authentic communication, rather than just looking for more effective ways to drive short-term metrics. "The initial client base is already there," Marcus explained. "What we need is someone who can develop and implement strategies that actually work. Someone who understands both the theoretical framework and the practical details of modern community engagement." The consulting practice Marcus described was everything I had been working toward without realizing it. Instead of fighting for recognition within Victoria's system, I could build my own system where my contributions would be inherently valued. Instead of developing strategies for Victoria to claim, I could develop strategies that would build my own professional reputation. But accepting Marcus's offer would also mean burning bridges with Pinnacle and positioning myself as a direct competitor to Victoria. It would mean acknowledging that my entire approach to career development within traditional corporate structures had been fundamentally flawed. "I want to do this," I said, surprising myself with how quickly the decision came. "When can we start?" Marcus laughed, the sound carrying the same enthusiasm that had made his graduate courses so compelling. "How about Monday? I've already scheduled preliminary meetings with 2 potential clients, and TechFlow wants to meet next week to discuss their secondary strategy needs." The timeline was aggressive and exciting. Instead of spending months planning a careful transition, I would be jumping directly into independent consulting with multiple clients already interested in my work. The financial risk was significant, but so was the potential for building exactly the kind of career I wanted. "There's one more thing," Marcus said. "The consulting practice will be a true partnership. Your name will be on everything we develop. You'll receive full credit for your strategic contributions, and we'll build the business around your expertise in authentic community engagement." The contrast with my experience at Pinnacle was stark and liberating. Instead of providing raw material for someone else's advancement, I would be building my own professional reputation based on work I could fully claim. Instead of trusting others to recognize my contributions, I would be creating an environment where recognition was inherent in the structure. After hanging up with Marcus, I sat in my empty apartment processing the magnitude of the decision I had just made. In one phone call, I had committed to leaving the security of my current position to start an independent consulting practice that would compete directly with my former employer. But I had also committed to something more fundamental: the belief that my ideas were valuable enough to build a career on, rather than valuable enough to let someone else steal. Victoria had taught me that success often depended more on strategic positioning than actual merit, but she had also revealed that my actual merit was significant enough to base strategic positioning on. The next morning, I would begin the process of giving my notice at Pinnacle and transitioning to a career built on my own recognized innovations, rather than uncredited contributions to someone else's reputation. Victoria had stolen my promotion ideas, but she had also inadvertently shown me that I was capable of much more than fighting for advancement within her system. It was time to discover what I could steal from her. Her clients, her reputation as an innovator, and maybe even the personal relationships she had built on a foundation of professional deception. The game was changing, and this time I would be the one making the rules. Monday morning arrived with an energy I hadn't felt in years. I walked into Pinnacle Marketing for what would be one of my final days, carrying a resignation letter in my bag and a strategic plan in my mind that Victoria would never see coming. The office buzzed with its usual Monday morning energy, but everything felt different now that I understood the game we had all been playing without realizing it. Victoria was in her office preparing for a client call, reviewing notes for what I recognized as another presentation built on concepts she had appropriated from team brainstorming sessions. She looked confident and energized, completely unaware that her primary source of innovative thinking was about to disappear forever. I had spent the weekend finalizing details with Marcus Webb about our consulting partnership and preparing documentation that would protect both of us legally. Sophia had reviewed our partnership agreement and confirmed that we had structured everything to avoid potential conflicts with my Pinnacle employment contract. More importantly, she had helped me understand exactly what intellectual property I could legitimately claim and what strategies I could use to compete with my former employer. The plan was elegantly simple and devastatingly effective. Instead of fighting Victoria for credit within her system, I would demonstrate the difference between authentic innovation and sophisticated theft by competing directly for her clients with strategies she couldn't replicate because she didn't actually understand how to develop them. My first move was scheduled for 11 that morning. TechFlow's CEO, Michael Chen, had agreed to a preliminary consultation call with Marcus and me about their secondary marketing strategy needs. What TechFlow didn't realize was that they were about to meet the actual architect of the approach that had impressed them so much when Victoria presented it as her own work. At 10:30, Victoria stopped by my desk with her usual professional smile, carrying papers for what appeared to be another collaborative project, where my contributions would be appropriated for her advancement. "Emma, I have an exciting opportunity for us to work together on the TechFlow expansion strategy," she said, settling into the chair beside my desk with the casual confidence of someone who had never questioned her right to claim other people's work. "They want to develop additional campaign approaches, and I think your research capabilities would be valuable for developing supporting materials." The irony was perfect. Victoria was asking me to help develop strategies for the same client that was about to discover she wasn't actually capable of the innovation she had claimed credit for. She wanted me to provide more raw material for campaigns she would present as her strategic thinking, never suspecting that TechFlow was simultaneously seeking those same capabilities from other sources. "That sounds interesting," I said carefully, maintaining the collaborative demeanor that had made me such an effective victim of her systematic theft. "What kind of timeline are you thinking about?" Victoria outlined a project schedule that would have me developing comprehensive research and preliminary strategic frameworks over the next month, while she focused on client relationship management and final presentations. As always, the structure ensured that she would receive credit for strategic innovation, while I received acknowledgement only for supporting research. "I really think this could be a breakthrough moment for both of us," Victoria continued, her tone suggesting she genuinely believed she was offering me valuable professional development. "Working on high-profile expansions of successful campaigns is exactly the kind of experience that builds strategic thinking capabilities." The condescension was breathtaking, but also revealing. Victoria actually believed that I needed her guidance to develop strategic thinking skills, even though every successful strategy she had ever presented was based on concepts I had originated. She had convinced herself that claiming credit for other people's innovations was equivalent to mentoring them in strategic development. "I appreciate the opportunity," I said, "but I actually need to discuss something important with you. Could we talk privately?" Victoria's expression shifted slightly, probably sensing that our conversation was moving beyond routine project planning. She gestured toward the small conference room, where we could speak without interruption from other team members. Once we were seated privately, I pulled out the resignation letter I had prepared and placed it on the table between us. Victoria stared at the document for a moment before looking up at me with genuine confusion. "Emma, what is this about?" she asked, her voice containing a mixture of surprise and concern that seemed authentic. "Are you having some kind of personal crisis? If this is about workload or stress management, we can definitely discuss adjustments." The assumption that my resignation must be motivated by personal problems rather than professional considerations was perfectly characteristic of how Victoria viewed my capabilities. She couldn't imagine that I might be leaving to pursue better opportunities because she had never acknowledged that I possessed the strategic thinking skills that would make such opportunities possible. "Victoria, I'm resigning to start an independent consulting practice focused on authentic community engagement strategies," I said, watching her face carefully for reactions. "I'll be partnering with Marcus Webb to develop innovative marketing approaches for companies that value genuine relationship building." Victoria's confusion deepened, as if I had just announced plans to become a professional astronaut. The idea that I could successfully operate as an independent strategist was clearly outside her conceptual framework for my capabilities. "Emma, I think you might be making a mistake," she said, her tone shifting to what was probably meant to be protective mentorship. "Independent consulting is incredibly challenging, especially for someone without a proven track record of strategic leadership. Wouldn't it be better to build more experience here before considering such a dramatic career change?" The phrase, "proven track record of strategic leadership," was particularly galling given that Victoria's entire track record was built on strategies I had developed. But her genuine concern also revealed something important. She actually believed her own narrative about my capabilities. After 3 years of systematically stealing my work, she had convinced herself that I was merely a talented researcher, rather than the strategic innovator whose ideas had built her reputation. "I appreciate your concern," I said, "but I'm confident this is the right decision for my career development. In fact, I wanted to give you advance notice that Webb Strategic Consulting will be competing for some of the same clients Pinnacle works with." Victoria's expression shifted to something more alert and strategic. The mention of client competition had clearly captured her attention in ways that my career development hadn't. "Emma, you need to be very careful about potential conflicts of interest," she said, her tone becoming more formal and legally cautious. "Your employment contract includes non-compete clauses that could create serious problems if you're soliciting Pinnacle clients." I smiled, remembering Sophia's thorough review of my contract and her confirmation that the non-compete provisions were poorly written and largely unenforceable. "I've had legal counsel review my contract obligations, and I'm confident that competing fairly in the open market doesn't violate any agreements." The conversation was interrupted by my phone buzzing with a call from Marcus. The timing was perfect. Our consultation with TechFlow was scheduled to begin in 5 minutes. "I need to take this call," I told Victoria, standing to leave the conference room. "But thank you for understanding about my resignation. I know this transition might create some challenges for upcoming projects." Victoria remained seated, staring at my resignation letter with an expression that suggested she was still processing the implications of what I had told her. She clearly hadn't anticipated that I would leave Pinnacle, much less that I would become a direct competitor for clients she considered securely within her sphere of influence. I walked to the small balcony outside our office building and answered Marcus's call, feeling the Austin morning air sharpen my focus for what was about to be the most important business conversation of my career. "Emma, are you ready for this?" Marcus asked, his voice containing the energy I remembered from his most engaging lectures. TechFlow is particularly interested in discussing community engagement strategies that go beyond traditional social media approaches. "I'm ready," I said, and meant it completely. "Let's show them what authentic innovation actually looks like." The consultation call with TechFlow exceeded every expectation I had dared to form. Michael Chen, their CEO, was immediately engaged when Marcus introduced me as the strategic architect behind community-driven marketing approaches. Janet Powell, their marketing director, asked detailed questions about methodology that allowed me to demonstrate comprehensive understanding of the principles underlying the strategies Victoria had stolen. But the real breakthrough came when Kevin Torres, their head of business development, asked about scalability and long-term strategic development. I was able to outline advanced applications of the community engagement framework that went far beyond anything Victoria could have presented, because she had never understood the theoretical foundations underlying the tactical approaches she had appropriated. "This is exactly what we've been looking for," Michael Chen said during the call. We were impressed by the initial strategy presentation from Pinnacle, but this conversation demonstrates a level of strategic depth that gives us confidence in long-term partnership potential. The contrast was perfect and intentional. TechFlow had been impressed by Victoria's presentation of my stolen work, but they were genuinely excited by my authentic presentation of the advanced concepts she had never understood. They were experiencing the difference between sophisticated theft and genuine innovation, though they didn't realize the comparison they were making. We'd like to schedule a formal presentation for next week, Janet Powell said. Can you develop a comprehensive strategic framework that builds on the community engagement principles we've discussed? Absolutely, I replied, feeling the satisfaction of finally being able to claim credit for work I had actually developed. I'll prepare a presentation that demonstrates how authentic community engagement can scale across multiple market segments and customer lifecycle stages. After ending the call, I remained on the balcony for several minutes, processing the magnitude of what had just happened. In one 30-minute conversation, I had secured the opportunity to compete directly with Victoria for a client she considered safely within her control. More importantly, I had demonstrated strategic capabilities that she couldn't replicate because she had never actually possessed them. When I returned to the office, Victoria was standing near my desk with an expression that suggested she had been waiting for me. Her casual confidence had been replaced by something more alert and concerned. "Emma, I just received an interesting call," she said, her tone carefully controlled. Michael Chen from TechFlow mentioned that they're exploring secondary strategic partnerships. He specifically asked about the strategic architect behind our community engagement framework. The irony was delicious. TechFlow was seeking more of the strategic thinking that had impressed them in Victoria's presentation, not realizing they were essentially asking her to recommend her own competition. Victoria was being forced to confront the reality that her clients wanted capabilities she couldn't provide because she had only ever stolen them rather than developed them. "That's interesting," I said neutrally. "What did you tell him?" Victoria's pause was telling. She clearly understood the implications of TechFlow's inquiry, but wasn't sure how to respond without revealing her own limitations. I explained that the strategic framework was developed through collaborative team efforts, she said finally, and that any expansion of the approach would require careful coordination to ensure consistency with our existing methodologies. The response was perfectly characteristic of Victoria's approach to managing situations where her lack of authentic capabilities might be exposed. She was trying to maintain control over strategic development while deflecting attention from her inability to generate original innovations. "That makes sense," I said. "Consistency is definitely important for maintaining strategic coherence." Victoria studied my expression, probably trying to determine whether I understood the competitive implications of TechFlow's inquiry. She clearly suspected that something was changing but wasn't sure what or how to respond strategically. The rest of the morning passed with unusual tension. Victoria made several attempts to discuss collaborative projects that would have kept me involved in developing strategies she could claim, but I deflected each conversation with polite references to my transition timeline and upcoming consulting commitments. Around noon, Derek Martinez called asking if I was available for lunch. Since our previous conversations about community engagement strategies, Derek had become increasingly interested in the theoretical frameworks underlying authentic marketing approaches. What he didn't realize was that he was about to become an unwitting participant in demonstrating the difference between Victoria's claimed expertise and my actual capabilities. "Emma, I hope this isn't presumptuous," Derek said when I answered, "but I've been thinking about our conversation regarding neighborhood revitalization strategies. I have some specific questions about implementation that I think you could help with." We agreed to meet at Sour Duck Market, a popular spot in South Austin, where the creative energy of the neighborhood matched my need for an environment that felt authentically innovative. The lunch rush was building as I arrived, with the usual mix of entrepreneurs, artists, and creative professionals that made Austin's food scene so dynamic. Derek was already seated at a corner table, reviewing what appeared to be planning documents for multiple architectural projects. He stood to greet me with genuine professional warmth, the kind of respectful collaboration I had been missing in my relationship with Victoria. "Thanks for meeting me," he said as we settled into our conversation. "I wanted to discuss something that might sound unusual, but I think your strategic approach could be valuable for a completely different kind of project." Derek explained that his architectural firm had been approached by a developer who wanted to create authentic community spaces rather than generic commercial developments. The project required marketing strategies that would attract local businesses and residents through genuine relationship building, rather than traditional promotional approaches. The developer specifically asked for a marketing consultation that focuses on authentic community engagement, Derek continued. When I mentioned your work on community-driven strategies, she was immediately interested in scheduling a consultation. The opportunity was both exciting and strategically perfect. Derek was essentially offering me the chance to demonstrate my capabilities in a context completely separate from Victoria's influence, while building professional relationships that could support my consulting practice's growth. What kind of timeline are they thinking about? I asked, curious about whether this could complement my work with Marcus or might conflict with our developing client schedule. Derek's response revealed that the project timeline aligned perfectly with my transition to independent consulting. More importantly, the developer was specifically seeking innovative approaches that went beyond traditional marketing tactics. Exactly the kind of strategic challenge that would allow me to demonstrate capabilities Victoria had never possessed. Actually, Derek said, his tone becoming more personal, there's something else I wanted to discuss. Victoria mentioned that you're leaving Pinnacle to start your own consulting practice, and I wanted you to know how much I respect that decision. The conversation was taking an unexpected direction, and I found myself curious about Derek's perspective on career transitions and professional independence. Victoria seemed surprised by your decision, Derek continued. She mentioned being concerned that independent consulting might be challenging for someone without extensive client development experience. The comment revealed that Victoria had shared her assessment of my capabilities with Derek, probably seeking validation for her belief that I was making a mistake by leaving the security of working under her direction. What she hadn't anticipated was that Derek might have formed his own opinions about my strategic capabilities through our direct conversations. I think Victoria might be underestimating your potential, Derek said, his tone becoming more direct. The strategic thinking you've demonstrated in our conversations suggests someone who's ready to build their own professional reputation, rather than supporting someone else's advancement. The observation was perceptive and validating. Derek had recognized capabilities in me that Victoria had systematically minimized and appropriated. More importantly, he understood that my decision to leave Pinnacle was based on strategic assessment rather than impulsive career dissatisfaction. I appreciate your confidence, I said. The transition is definitely challenging, but I'm excited about the opportunity to work on projects where my contributions will be fully recognized. Derek nodded thoughtfully. That's exactly what I mean. You clearly have strategic capabilities that deserve recognition. Victoria's lucky to have had your contributions to her team's success. But maybe it's time for you to build success that's clearly attributed to your own work. The conversation continued for another hour, covering everything from authentic community engagement strategies to the challenges of building professional reputation in competitive markets. Derek was an excellent collaborator, asking insightful questions and offering perspectives that helped me think about marketing in new ways. But underneath our productive discussion, I was processing the strange reality of receiving genuine professional respect from Victoria's husband, while she continued to minimize and appropriate my capabilities. Derek clearly understood my strategic value better than Victoria did, despite having known me for a much shorter time. As our lunch concluded, Derek made an observation that crystallized something important about my situation with Victoria. Emma, I hope this doesn't sound inappropriate, he said, but I think you might be discovering that some professional relationships are more limiting than supportive. Sometimes the people who are supposed to help us advance are actually the ones holding us back. The comment was both insightful and revealing. Derek had apparently observed enough about Victoria's professional approach to recognize that her relationship with me might not be as mutually beneficial as she claimed. He understood that my departure from Pinnacle might represent escape from limitation rather than abandonment of opportunity. That's a thoughtful way to put it, I replied. I'm definitely learning that career advancement sometimes requires changing environments rather than just working harder within existing structures. Derek smiled knowingly. Exactly. And sometimes the best career moves are the ones that initially seem risky but align with who you actually want to become professionally. Walking back to my car after lunch, I realized that Derek had given me something valuable, confirmation that my assessment of Victoria's exploitation was accurate, and that my decision to compete independently was strategically sound. More importantly, he had demonstrated that people could recognize my genuine capabilities when they weren't filtered through Victoria's need to minimize my contributions. The afternoon brought the culmination of everything I had been building toward. At 3 o'clock, I was scheduled to present my resignation to James Morrison, Pinnacle's CEO, and discuss the transition timeline for my current projects. But I was also scheduled to deliver something much more significant: a demonstration that Victoria's recent promotion had been based on fraudulent claims about her strategic capabilities. Morrison's office reflected the success of Pinnacle's growth from a small Austin agency to a regional marketing powerhouse. Awards from industry organizations lined the walls, along with case studies from campaigns that had established the agency's reputation for innovative strategic thinking. Several of those case studies featured strategies I had developed, but that had been presented as Victoria's innovations. "Emma, Victoria mentioned that you're considering a career change," Morrison said as I settled into the chair across from his desk. "I wanted to discuss this directly because you've been such a valuable contributor to our team's success." The conversation began predictably, with Morrison expressing surprise about my decision to leave and offering to discuss adjustments to my role or compensation that might address whatever concerns had motivated my resignation. But when I explained that I was leaving to start an independent consulting practice, his response revealed something important about how my contributions had been perceived within the agency's leadership. "I have to admit, Emma, I'm surprised to hear about your interest in strategic consulting," Morrison said, his tone suggesting genuine confusion. "Your work has always been excellent, but I've understood your strengths to be primarily in research and implementation rather than strategic development." The comment was devastating confirmation of how completely Victoria had erased my actual contributions from the agency's institutional memory. Morrison, who had approved my hiring and reviewed my performance evaluations, believed that I was primarily a tactical executor rather than a strategic innovator, because that was how Victoria had consistently presented my role. "I appreciate your assessment," I said carefully, "but I think there might be some disconnect between my actual contributions and how they've been communicated to leadership." Morrison looked genuinely interested in understanding what I meant, so I took the opportunity to present documentation I had prepared about my actual role in developing strategies that had been attributed to Victoria. The evidence was comprehensive and undeniable: email threads showing my original concept development, draft presentations with my authorship, and research documentation that proved my ownership of strategic frameworks Victoria had claimed. "This is concerning," Morrison said after reviewing the materials I had provided. "Are you suggesting that Victoria has been claiming credit for work she didn't actually develop?" The question hung in the air with implications that would fundamentally change how Morrison understood Victoria's recent promotion and the agency's strategic capabilities. I had presented him with evidence that the strategic innovation director he had recently appointed was not actually capable of the innovation that had justified her advancement. "I'm suggesting that there's been a systematic pattern of strategic contributions being attributed to people who presented them, rather than people who developed them," I said diplomatically. "The documentation shows the actual development process behind strategies that have been important to Pinnacle's success." Morrison spent the next 20 minutes reviewing the evidence more thoroughly, asking detailed questions about timeline and development processes that allowed me to demonstrate comprehensive understanding of strategic approaches Victoria had claimed as her own work. "Emma, if what you're showing me is accurate," Morrison said finally, "then we have a serious problem with how strategic contributions are being recognized and attributed within the agency." The conversation continued for another hour, with Morrison asking increasingly pointed questions about the scope of Victoria's appropriation and the potential implications for the agency's reputation. By the end of our discussion, he had a clear understanding that Victoria's promotion had been based on fraudulent claims about her strategic capabilities. "I need to investigate this thoroughly," Morrison said as our meeting concluded. "In the meantime, I want you to know that if you decide to reconsider your resignation, we would be very interested in discussing a strategic role that would provide appropriate recognition for your actual contributions." The offer was gratifying, but no longer relevant to my career plans. I had already committed to building my own consulting practice where recognition would be inherent in the structure rather than dependent on other people's willingness to acknowledge my work. I appreciate the offer, I said, but I'm committed to the consulting opportunity. However, I'm happy to assist with any transition processes that would help the agency manage current projects effectively. As I left Morrison's office, I knew that Victoria's career at Pinnacle would never be the same. She had built her reputation on stolen innovations, and now her systematic theft had been exposed to the person who controlled her professional future. More importantly, she was about to discover that the source of her strategic success was now competing directly for the clients who had made her reputation possible. The final piece of my strategic plan fell into place that evening when Marcus called with news that TechFlow had accelerated their timeline for selecting a secondary strategic partner. They want final presentations next week, Marcus said, his voice containing excitement about the rapid development of our business opportunity. Apparently, they've had some concerns about putting all their strategic development with one agency, especially for long-term growth planning. The irony was perfect. TechFlow's concerns about over-reliance on Pinnacle were directly related to Victoria's inability to provide the ongoing strategic innovation they needed. They had been impressed by her presentation of my stolen work, but they recognized that they needed access to the source of that innovation rather than just someone who could present it effectively. Emma, this is our chance to demonstrate the difference between authentic strategic thinking and sophisticated presentation, Marcus continued. TechFlow is seeking exactly what you can provide because they've experienced what happens when strategic depth doesn't match strategic claims. The presentation I prepared for TechFlow was everything the stolen strategy Victoria had presented could never be: comprehensive, scalable, and built on theoretical frameworks that could generate ongoing innovation rather than just tactical implementation. I outlined advanced applications of community engagement principles that would position TechFlow as a thought leader in authentic business relationship building. More importantly, I presented strategic thinking that Victoria couldn't replicate because she had never understood the conceptual foundations underlying the approaches she had stolen. TechFlow would experience firsthand the difference between working with someone who could generate ongoing innovation versus someone who could only present ideas developed by others. The presentation was scheduled for the same week that Morrison would be conducting his investigation into Victoria's systematic appropriation of team members' strategic contributions. Victoria would simultaneously lose her primary client and face professional consequences for the theft that had built her reputation. But there was one more element to my strategic plan that would complete Victoria's understanding of what she had lost. Derek had mentioned Victoria's surprise about my career transition and her concern about my prospects for independent success. What Victoria didn't realize was that her husband had become one of my strongest advocates and potential clients. Derek had scheduled a consultation with his developer contact for the following week to discuss authentic community engagement strategies for the neighborhood revitalization project. The consultation would demonstrate my capabilities to someone who could provide ongoing business development opportunities while revealing to Derek the true source of the innovative thinking he had been attributing to Victoria. When Derek realized that the strategic frameworks he had been discussing with me were actually my original contributions rather than capabilities I had learned from Victoria, he would understand that his wife's professional reputation was built on work she had stolen rather than developed. The personal implications of that realization would extend far beyond professional considerations. Victoria had stolen my promotion ideas, but she had also revealed the systematic way she approached both professional relationships and personal ones. She had shown Derek and everyone else a version of herself that was built on claimed achievements rather than authentic capabilities. When that facade collapsed, it would take more than just her career with it. 3 months later, Web Strategic Consulting had secured 6 major clients, including TechFlow, Derek's developer contact, and 3 other companies that had chosen to work with us instead of Pinnacle, after experiencing the difference between authentic innovation and sophisticated theft. Victoria had been demoted from her strategic innovation director role after Morrison's investigation confirmed systematic appropriation of team members' work. More significantly, she had lost Derek, who filed for divorce after discovering that the professional success he had admired was built on stolen work. The community revitalization project Derek had introduced me to became a model for authentic engagement strategies that attracted national attention from urban planning organizations. TechFlow's campaign success led to speaking opportunities at marketing conferences where I presented the theoretical frameworks underlying community-driven marketing approaches. The reputation I built was based entirely on work I could fully claim because I had actually developed it. Victoria's career never recovered from the exposure of her systematic theft. Without access to other people's innovations to appropriate, she was revealed as someone who lacked the strategic capabilities she had built her reputation on. She left Austin entirely, taking a position with a small agency in Dallas where her past success was viewed as transferable expertise rather than fraud. But the most satisfying element of the entire situation was realizing that I had never needed to steal anything from Victoria. Her clients, her reputation, and her marriage had all been built on foundations that couldn't survive exposure to authentic alternatives. When people could choose between sophisticated theft and genuine innovation, they chose authenticity every time. Victoria had taught me that success often depended more on strategic positioning than merit. But she had also revealed that the most effective strategic positioning was simply being authentic when everyone else was pretending. She had stolen my promotion ideas, but in doing so, she had shown me that my ideas were valuable enough to build an entire career on. The game had changed, and I had won by simply being who I actually was instead of who Victoria had tried to convince everyone I should be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.